Good morning, and welcome to Theater in the Middle Ages. Let's talk a little bit about time. When I was in the 90s, I had long dreadlocks and really bad, overzealous eyeliner. And I read poetry, and I had combat boots and long flannel, and I really hid my body behind clothing. So fast forward to the 2000s when I started teaching, and everyone was reading really form-fitting clothes. Girls, especially, I remember tight pants that they'd sit down and it was almost gynecological. We tend, as human beings, to think the period that came right before us was bad or stupid or ignorant. You can really see that in fashion, but you can also see that in trends. A very conservative government is followed by a more liberal government, which is followed by a more conservative. You see that in the ebb and flow of what we put our national attention on. I'm saying this because the last time we spoke, we were talking about Greek theater, and now we're in the Middle Ages. Now, something very important happened. Somebody was born, and it changed the way we look at time. We were talking about 500 BC in Greek times, and now we're looking at 476 to 1400 AD, Anno Domini, after death. So during that span, the birth of whom we know is Jesus Christ changed the way we look at time. And this particular birth changed the way we relate to each other. Now, I'm going to be focusing on Western society, so we're going to go to Europe. And I told you it's around 476 to 1400. You need to know that Latin was the common language and that Christianity was the common religion. More specifically, Catholicism, but I just want you to think of Christianity. Life was really rough in the Middle Ages, like really, really rough. And so one of the things that they heralded was religion. Middle-aged people in Europe around this time thought that life was really, really rough, but the promise of heaven and the promise of something better in the afterlife is what sustained them in this one. So entertainment for them was very much religious-based. Now, yes, it was religious-based in the Grecian times too. These were ceremonies and rituals for the gods, but this one was more following the Bible. So entertainment really started at church. There were reenactments of certain portions of the Bible. Actually, the whole Bible was kind of up for grabs. If you've ever read the Bible, it lends itself to dramatic literature nicely. They hated the Greeks. So this is why I said you tend to hate the period that came before you. I don't know if you've ever been to 80s parties or 90s parties, but everyone dresses, like super 80s. And my God, it's like the 80s, right? Okay, but most people did not dress like that, but that's like we make fun of it, right? So the church in the Middle Ages rejected all things Greek. They thought they were godless heathens for how they behaved. But there are some ways that it does parallel it. So there are some ways that the church was similar to Greeks, especially when it comes to entertainment. First of all, you know that these were religious stories that they utilized foundationally to entertain. It started with Easter and rebirth. Greeks didn't call Easter Easter, obviously, but it was the springtime of rebirth. It was public and communal, so it attracted a mass audience just like they did in Greek. Remember, in Greek, even prisoners were allowed to watch entertainment and to see theater. There was still only male performers. We do not have any female performers yet, and they keep that up in the Middle Ages. There is musical accompaniment. Do you remember what I said about the Greeks, how it was just a flute and percussion? Well, now they have a little bit more involved music. So just like the Greeks, there is musical accompaniment. And you remember what we use that was large and carved and wooden, and it had a built-in megaphone? The mask. So in the Grecian times, now you're going to have to, this is a mask that I made, but its horn fell off. But the Grecian times, the mask was only worn by the devil. Okay? And if you think about the stereotypical devil, the red, the horns, the tail coming out of his hiney, the pitchfork, you can thank the Middle Ages. Because the Middle Ages wanted the devil to be very recognizable. He was like a monster. I shouldn't have done that when I have a cold. Pardon me. Water tastes good when it's in a Spider-Man glass. Yeah, so the devil was the mask, and they gave us the look of it. They wanted the devil to be like completely separate from us, make the devil into an other. Personally, I think it's a lot more intoxicating when the devil looks just like us and just is a really cool person you want to get to know. But they really wanted that separation in the Middle Ages. So that's how they were similar. How they're different than Greeks is that there was no more chorus, no more entity acting as mother-in-law, mouthing the play rights philosophy. No more dance. Dance was too much like sex. Okay, they were like, no dancing, that's too similar. They were like that crazy town in Footloose. Okay, the stage configurations was different. So what they would do, there were lots of plagues going around in this time too. So for a while, there was no public gatherings. So they would bring the entertainment to the people in their villages, and they do that on a cart. And the cart was super duper expensive. They were sponsored by guilds, like a fabric guild, maybe a gold guild, who knows? All kinds of guilds would sponsor these carts, and they were worth thousands and thousands of dollars. And they would get jacked. People would actually rob them because they would go to all these villages who are in dire need of money and supplies, and they'd be like, hey, we're here to entertain you, and they're like, no, we're going to kill you, and we're going to take all the nice stuff that your cart comes along. I'm not saying that as trivia. I'm saying that because people put their lives in the hands of the public just so they could entertain them. That's how specific that calling was. We'll talk about what they did to their bodies in the next time period. Okay. So, for the Middle Ages, the Greeks had moral teachings where the medieval times, the Middle Ages, had church teachings. So the Greeks were like, just be cool, man. Cool. And the Middle Ages, their morality code was like, if you don't do this, you're going to go to hell and burn and suffer. So it was a lot more punitive. You need to know what a trope is. That's T-R-O-P-E-S. It is a written text in dialogue form that was incorporated into the Mass. I'll say that again. A written text in dialogue form that was incorporated into the Mass. So tropes would be Mary says this, Joseph says this, Mary says this, Joseph says this. It's in dialogue form, as opposed to the narratives that we were used to. Does that make sense? So instead of Mary saying like, oh my gosh, I felt the quickening of my belly and knew that the baby was coming, I looked to my husband and grabbed him steadily by the arm. It would say, Mary, ... ow. Okay? Less narrative, more dialogue. You need to know what a passion play is. A passion play is the last few days in the life of Jesus Christ, and they were not a picnic, right? He didn't spend them at the spa. He got crucified. He was tortured. Because they didn't allow sex in the Middle Ages, the violence ratcheted up. And you can see that when it comes to entertainment. If you take away something like sex, which is a human compulsion, keeps us alive, keeps the species alive, then you'll see the violence ratchet up. And so oftentimes, if they were doing a crucifixion, they would actually crucify a prisoner. If they were fresh out of prisoners, then they had our first special effects. They would kill a pig or something that's similar to human skin, and they would make pouches. So if you poked the pouch, they'd fill it with intestines or blood or organs. It would come out. So remember how back in the Grecian times, the violence was kept on stage? Well, they wanted more and more of it in the Middle Ages. So I don't know if you've ever been around a dead animal, but you can smell it. There's an olfactory response. So you couldn't only smell it, but you could also feel and see blood splatter. This is the first time we had special effects. And these were during passion plays. Passion plays were not passionate like love passion. They were passionate because they were bloody. And because they really focused in on the last few days of Jesus Christ. And there is a movie called The Passion of the Christ that gets it right historically. Mel Gibson, as the director, had made it very, very, very bloody. Okay. So you need to know that there were special effects during this time, and it didn't just stop with blood. They also did miracles, angels coming down, weather phenomenon. It was an interesting time because the audience was so close to the actors and the action, like we are, that you could really experience and see the little intricate things that you were missing in Greek theater when you were far, far, far away, like that horse, right? Okay, you need to know that it started at 4:30 in the morning and lasted until late at night. The wagons, the carts had 2 levels, so the actors would perform, and on the bottom level, which was not visible to the audience, that's where all their costumes and props were. The Middle Ages was an interesting time. And so let me tell you, I have like 30 seconds left. Let me tell you about your assignment. I would like you to write a morality play. So in the Middle Ages, the morality play starred somebody called Everyman. And that's Everyman with a capital E. Everyman was about mankind. And they were tempted by bad, but ended up going towards good. So they had a moral. What I want you to do is to write me a morality tale, at least a page, and I want it to have some kind of moral in it. So for example, maybe your moral is don't go outside during a pandemic. So you'd write me a story about somebody who maybe chose to ignore that and what the consequences were. We'll have that due whatever day you see this. We'll have it due in a week. So I'll set that up in your assignments so you can see when that due date is, because some of you may be seeing this on different days. So morality tale is due for your medieval Middle Ages time period. I hope that makes sense. All right, I'm going to say goodbye, and we'll catch you at the Elizabethan lecture, which will be on next. Peace out.